Welcome, everyone, to the first webinar of the 2020 Summer Wellness Series, Self-Care and Crisis Response During COVID-19, presented by Dr. Glory Ove. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. The City of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. The Summer Wellness Series is presented in partnership with the Taylor Institute for Teaching and Learning and the Campus Mental Health Strategy. Please note that this webinar will be recorded and published online to be viewed after. My name's Dr. Melissa Boyce. I'm the Academic Coordinator of the Embedded Certificate in Mental Wellbeing and Resilience, and I will be your moderator today. With me, I have Dr. Cheryl Jeffs, Educational Development Consultant at the Taylor Institute, who will be co-moderating the Q&A portion of the webinar. Feel free to use the chat box during the presentation to ask questions. There will be the time at the end for Q&A, and we will do our best to answer as many questions as possible. Please note that the chat box and your name display will be edited out of the final recording. Note that at any time, if you speak into your microphone, your voice will be recorded. All microphones and videos are turned off except for the facilitator to ensure that your webinar experience is not disrupted with other video images or sounds. At this time, I want to introduce our first presenter of the Summer Wellness Series, Dr. Glory Ove. Glory is a postdoctoral associate at the Department of Psychology and the Taylor Institute for Teaching and Learning. Her research is focused on crisis response in post-secondary institutions. Currently, she is studying the intersection between teaching and learning, mental health, and well-being. She's a member of the Campus Mental Health Strategy Subcommittee on Teaching and Learning, and a respected educator and a published researcher within her field of study. Welcome, Glory, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Melissa, for that introduction. I also want to thank everyone for attending the first series in the Wellness Series. Just a heads up, as we talk, I will be looking up. I have my notes just up above me to help reduce the stress of doing this webinar. This is my first in the series of yet to come. So I want to start off this session by talking a bit about our learning goals for this time. For this session, we'll be exploring the relationship between crisis response and self-care. We'll look at the benefits of self-care, and we'll also develop a self-care plan. Let's start off by defining what a crisis is. A crisis is an unexpected event or sequence of events of enormous scale. It might be overwhelming, with an overwhelming speed, resulting in a high degree of uncertainty that gives rise to disorientation, a feeling of loss of control, and strong emotional disturbance. We can certainly say that COVID-19 fits the definition of a crisis. There have been high degrees of uncertainty. We've had loss of control, and we've had strong emotional disturbances around COVID-19 and its effects on us. Some characteristics of a crisis. A crisis is disruptive in nature. It's intense. It can be traumatic. We've had people who have lost their lives. People have lost their jobs. It's emotionally impacting on our sense of normalcy and our way of life with negative long-term effects. Our daily routines and our lives have been completely disrupted. We are all trying to cope with the crisis with the best way we can on a daily basis. It's been quite intense for us. We find out that our anxiety and stress levels have increased as we have experienced all kinds of emotional and psychological upheavals both in our personal lives and in our professional lives. Additionally, we've been so focused on responding to the crisis in changing our teaching and learning delivery. We're working from home, we're learning from home, we're teaching from home. Our daily routines and lives have been completely disrupted. We talk about the new normal, and it's sometimes for me it sounds a bit funny because it's actually not normal. We do not know what will happen in the next months and years to come as a result of COVID-19. We are still learning new things about the crisis. So our lives have definitely been impacted. We have lost our work-life balance in addition to responding to numerous everyday challenges that we are facing as a result of COVID-19. Crisis response, I just want to quickly define that crisis response is the action or multiple actions that we take to effectively contain and resolve a crisis. It includes the protection of life and property, reestablishing some sense of control over the situation, in addition to minimizing the effects of the crisis. For us, right now, in the province and worldwide, we've seen that the governments are all trying to see how much we can minimize the protection, the death rates everywhere. We're trying to establish that sense of control over the situation and minimize as much as possible the effect of the crisis on our lives. This has been a challenging crisis for everyone, and we've all been focused to an extent on responding to this crisis as best as we can. Our mental health and self-care has been impacted due to this crisis. And I'm advocating that in the crisis response models that we have and plans that we have, our self-care and mental health care should be a part of crisis response plans for universities, for organizations, and for us as individuals as well. Why do we need that? Research study has shown that when people do not engage in self-care, it could lead to emotional triggers that may activate depression, anxiety, fear, mental health concerns, sadness, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Why? Because crisis response and crisis in itself has a way of absorbing all our time and attention and can make it incredibly draining, both physically and emotionally, and psychology as well. The impact of the crisis and responding to the crisis has far-fetched impacts on us for years to come. Also, it may leave deep emotional scars that we may not even be aware of. And so it's important to look at self-care when we are responding to crisis. It's not us being selfish, but it's us trying to take care of ourselves in the best ways we can so we can respond effectively to the crisis that we are facing. One thing I found in my research that I did last year was that self-care was one of those things that gets ignored and is not a priority during the crisis response process. This is not intentional, I found. During crisis response, it's quite easy for us to focus on the response process and forget the need for rest. It also, for some of us, it may feel inappropriate to take that time to rest or even to indulge in some positivity. Some of us feel, oh, I shouldn't waste that time. There's a lot to be done. And our belief as well is that leaders, faculty, staff, everyone, that expectation is we need to be concerned about the well-being of others, often to the exclusion of our own well-being. On the next slide, I have two responses of participants I interviewed for my research last year that looked at crisis response in post-secondary context. And self-care was one of those themes that came out from my research. And I would like you to spend just about 30 seconds reading through this participants' responses as to why self-care during a crisis is important for us. Now, these participants talked about the residual effects or impacts of post-traumatic stress after responding to a crisis, and issues around trouble sleeping or trouble eating, and some signs that we might not observe. In addition, it's important to talk about what happens to you during a crisis and how you are taking care of yourself. Now let's look at some benefits of self-care. Self-care, I see self-care as a way of taking back some control, which reduces the sense of feelings or the feelings of helplessness. Self-care attends to the whole being to create a healthy and stable person. It helps us manage our stress. It builds resilience. It's good for our physical health, our mental, spiritual, and emotional state of mind. Self-care paves the way for kind, compassionate engagements around the world. It prevents burnout and is also essential for the optimal well-being of everyone, both faculty, staff, administrators. Everyone needs some form of self-care. It's important for our sense of well-being, and as we continue to respond and effectively support others through the crisis response process. Now, there is an analogy I like to use when we get on an aircraft, and they tell us one of the first things that we are told is to put on your oxygen mask. It says put it on before you can put on the mask for your child or some other person that needs help. It's important because you need to be stable, you need to be mentally fit and well. I like to say you need to be alive to be able to support others. And so that action alone of putting on your mask first before supporting others indicates that your self-care is important during crisis. And what is self-care? I see self-care as the engagement in thoughts and behaviors and actions that maintain your physical, emotional, social, and spiritual well-being. Self-care is a deliberate action, it's intentional, and it is an individual action you take for yourself. It's also personalized. Your self-care activity might be different from my self-care activity, might be different from the next person's self-care activity. So it's your self-care. It's what works for you that helps to manage your stress level. Now, self-care is not frivolous. It's a radical act of love for you. It's a necessity. It is not a luxury. We read from the crisis, the responses of the two participants and the effect of not taking care of themselves. So it's a necessity. It is personalized, it is intentional. And I always like to say, start with small steps. When you are in that crisis response mode and you are attending to others, we tend to forget that, especially if self-care is not, it's strange to us. It's important to start it off with small baby steps and do what works for you. What works for you is important. Now, I heard an analogy recently, and I found that quite true, and it fits the situation that we're in. That we are all in the same storm. We are all facing COVID-19. But while we are all in this storm, we're equally on different boats in the same storm. And I like to apply that analogy to self-care. Do what works for you in your boat. You know what your stress level is. You understand what's going on in your situation, and therefore you can apply those steps to you. The long run and the benefit is you can effectively support others, be in a better state of mind, in a better well-being, to be more productive and effective. Now let's talk about creating a self-care plan. It's crucial, I like to say, to spend a little time to get to know yourself, get to know what your mind, body, and soul needs in order to function at your highest level. Crisis disrupts everything about our lives, everything. And so getting to understand yourself during the crisis response process and what happens to you, it's quite important in creating your self-care plan. By learning to identify some activities and things that support your well-being, you'll be able to create a customized plan for yourself. It's what works for you. It could be as simple as just 2 things you have in your plan. It could be a whole list. It could be a 10-minute activity. The key thing here is what works for you as you respond to the crisis. Also, when creating your self-care plan, it is good to be aware of your emotional turmoil, your past traumas, crisis experiences, and your levels of stress and anxiety. This should inform the type of plan that you create. And remember, just because I say the word plan does not mean it's a whole gumshoe of a plan. It's what works for you. In crisis, as we respond, there are certain things we come to the table with that we may not be aware. I like to always say that when you're coming to the crisis response or you are in a crisis situation, it's always good to be aware of your past traumas and past experiences and your anxiety level. And so when you're creating that plan, you are creating that plan in cognizance with all this at the back of your mind. So let's see what a self-care plan might look like. I have some examples. I have a plan that I adapted, and I have an example of my plan. I put it up in a table for everyone to see, but it doesn't always look like that. It's not always linear. My plan is not always linear. One thing to note is that I want you to be, it's good to be kind to yourself. Do not be so fixated that if I have not done this today, then the plan is lost. No, it's just care for you the best way that it works for you. The step 1 in creating a crisis self-care plan will be determining your stress level. I have a table here that depicts some physical, psychological effects and behavioral effects. For me, one quick way to assess your stress level is to complete the informal inventory by checking off any effects of stress you might be currently experiencing. I'm just going to allow you to go through the table. On your own, identify what you might be currently experiencing. So I will give you a minute here to look through the table. What types of behavioral effects are you experiencing as a result of stress? What types of psychological or emotional effects? And what types of physical effects are you experiencing? So I'm going to pause here for a bit to allow you to go through the table. For me, one of the physical effects I have experienced has been sleeplessness and headaches. My psychological effects have really felt a bit out of control, and I've suffered. There have been days I have felt depressed. And also I find that I've been struggling a bit lately, especially with this long haul. I've been at home for over 9 weeks, 10 weeks now, and working from home. It's taking its toll on me as an individual living alone. And so isolation has been a major factor for me. The next step in the process of creating your self-care plan is to identify your stressors. What are some specific stressors around COVID-19 or in your personal life that has been affecting you? So below, I have some specific samples, the sample list. This is not exhaustive. There are probably more stressors that are out there. And so, but this gets you started in the reflection process as you begin to work on your plan. This helps you reflect. What are some things that causes you stress? I have COVID-19 there. I'm sure everyone will be checking off COVID-19 over there. Some people have personal health issues, isolation. Mine is isolation and Zoom fatigue. So I'm going to pause here to give you a minute to go through this and also to reflect. If yours is not here, you can note it down somewhere. Zoom fatigue has been one key stressor that I've heard. For some people, it's loss of job. I have someone in my family who lost his job as a result of COVID-19. And so that's been a layer of emotional layer for us and psychological layer in addition to the stress level that I've been feeling. Isolation, like I said, has been a major thing for me, and depression. The next step in creating your self-care plan is to identify how you would typically cope with stress. What are some things that you do that will help you cope with stress? There are healthy strategies and there are unhealthy strategies. I'm also going to pause here for a bit to allow you to go through the lists as well. My strategy is I love to be physically active. I love to go for a run and a walk on a daily basis. I like to be able to go out and see people and just that connection, that eye-to-eye connection with another individual, with another human being does something to my brain and helps me understand that I am not alone in this situation. I am in the same storm with every other person. I put myself on a diet in the last 3 weeks and decided to switch up my eating a bit. I've gone off carbs to help me. I've, made time to do things that I really love. I pick up a book that is non-academic, has nothing to do with academia, and I read. just for that enjoyment to help reduce my stress. I hope you've been able to go through this and ticked off or written off somewhere some things that apply to you. Now you're ready to create your own personal self-care plan. Your goal here in creating this plan is to choose and incorporate something daily or weekly, a self-care practice that works for you. You identify what your current major stressors are, your current self-care strategies, and additional self-care strategies you might want to implement in the future. Remember, your self-care plan can be just one item. It could be as many items as you want. It could be as simple as 10 minutes or 5 minutes. The most important thing is do what works for you. The crisis is here to stay. COVID-19 is here to stay at least for the next year, while research is going on getting the vaccine and medication. But for the period of time we have to cope with this as best as we can by focusing on ourselves. I have an example of my self-care plan that I put up. Like I said, this is looking so neat because of this webinar. It doesn't always look like this. It's not linear. I have my current major stressors, which is isolation from my friends, from my family. I have my personal health issues. I have Zoom fatigue and the difficult news around COVID-19. These are my major stressors. Now, my current self-care strategies has been to connect quickly with my children, with my parents. I've connected with my friends just to have some conversations. I always write 3 things I'm thankful for to create some positivity around me. I've been doing lots of gardening now, transplanting my plants into bigger flower pots so they can at least live longer because I tend to kill my plants. For my personal health issues, I go for a daily run, sometimes a walk. I open my windows. My windows are open right now for some fresh air and get some sunshine to boost my mood. For Zoom fatigue, what I've done is turn up my video function to reduce visual overload. In fact, right now, what's happening, I just learned this morning how to pin my video so I do not see any other person that is up on Zoom today. So all I can see is myself. That's one way to reduce the Zoom fatigue, just pin up your own video. Because when we're on Zoom, we have so many visual cues. We have so many, our brains are overloaded. We're looking at so many people at the same time, and we are not made for that. I always tend to do, I say I have itchy fingers and an itchy body, meaning that I tend to move a lot. So after sitting for about 10, 20 minutes, I stand up and have some movements. I get my hot chocolate, I get my bottle of water, which is right here. You can change things up by calling on your phone, or just use the speaker view, or pinning, like I've done, my own video. Another thing I've done is listen to news, just 2 stations, and that's it for me. I do not listen to news. I turn off my notifications for the day. I love to listen to inspiring and uplifting stories. I see lots of wonderful YouTube videos of how people are coping through the stress. My additional self-care strategy is I'm planning a trip with my sons. So I'm looking to the future for after COVID-19. I'm planning a trip with them. I've taken up yoga. I paint my nails. And I'm listening to my body to just know when to take a break. And finally, think of your self-care plan as a roadmap with planned vehicle maintenance, travel activities, and rest stops along the way. Remember that the world is not perfect, so we won't be able to do everything perfectly. Relax. Take it one day at a time. Do not stress yourself too much because you already have so many layers of stress already. Times of crisis are pivotal opportunities to better understand ourselves and get to know yourself a little bit better as you respond in this crisis process. Remember, the oxygen mask provides the support you need, which is your self-care, and then you can effectively support others. I've tried to, in these slides, not make it as technical as possible because I want everyone to benefit from this. So thank you so much for listening, and it's open for questions. Melissa, over to you.
Thank you very much, Glory. There were a lot of comments that came up during your presentation, and I'm going to reframe with Cheryl a few of those in terms of questions. First, to reassure everyone, the slides I believe will be available they will be shared afterward. So no worries there. Several people mentioned that they have children at home and that they're finding that incredibly stressful, the homeschooling, the interruptions. Would you have any specific self-care strategies or suggestions about things that are maybe less easy to control like that?
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. I had an illustration that I forgot to mention. I watched an advertisement on the TV about a mom who was so stressed out with her kids and she went into the bathroom for 10 minutes, locked herself in the bathroom for just 10 minutes to get some time for herself. And so with kids at home, it's not always, it's never a straightforward process with the homeschooling going on. But I want to start off with homeschooling. I would suggest, especially if you're not a teacher and you've never taught before, please do not be hard on yourself. I like to use the phrase that it is not a do or die. So take it easy on yourself so you do not transfer you don't transfer your anxiety to your kids as you homeschool them. So take it easy, take it one day at a time. And if it's not working at that particular moment, take a break. Everyone just take a break, take a 5. Go out for, change your location where your study place. You can change your location. You can go out for a 5 or 10 minute walk. For kids, for moms, for dads who have kids at home, use the bathroom. Lock yourself in there for a few minutes. And I also think that just having a chat with the kids, say, Mom or Dad, or we just need a few minutes to think, to breathe. Give me 10 and I'll be back. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much, Glory. A second question related to grocery shopping, and several people mentioned that going into to grocery stores and a lot of those sort of day-to-day activities that we're so used to has become incredibly stressful, and I wondered in those types of contexts, knowing that it can be difficult to have groceries delivered with capacity issues and so on, recommendations to engage in self-care and in feelings of safety there.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. We all use face masks now. I have mine somewhere there. I got face mask recently from a friend. So it's important to have your face mask on if you're going to go grocery shopping. Try as much as possible to do so. If you can't go once a week, once in 2 weeks, so have your list when you're going in there. Try not to, how do I put this, stress so much about it, because that increases your stress level. With your face mask on, when you get home, you wash your hands, you can use disposable gloves, and I do more bulk shopping that I've done. So I do more bulk shopping because that way it reduces how many times I have to go to the grocery store. So if that's helpful, do some bulk shopping as well. I know the online, it's good to, you can order online as well, though it takes time because delivery takes time before it gets to do. But you can actually plan your online shopping a week or 2 weeks ahead of when you need your products. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Glory. We did have another question, and certainly recognizing the intensity of some of our participants' stress. The specific question was, how do I deal with the fear of my loved one's safety?
I would suggest take 5 in the sense of going over the stress in your mind has a way of allowing fear to rule our minds and the way we think and function. Let's do everything we can to protect their safety, encourage them to keep safe. I have 2 parents. My parents are in that age group where they are at risk and they have underlying issues, health issues as well. And one thing I told, they don't live here, they live back in Nigeria. And what I told my parents was, I explained the situation to them and I told them for our sake and because we love you so much, we want you to live longer. I told them, please stay home. Do not go out as much as possible. If you need to go out, just walk around because they'll have a large compound, walk around that and have my sister do the shopping. And so to reduce your level of stress and fear and theirs as well, I think it's good to have a conversation, either on Zoom or a phone call, and talk about the issues around COVID-19 and try to explain it to them that it's for their own safety, their health, and the benefits of them staying, and just that benefits of doing what is required of them by the province. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Glory. A question came up, what can we do to build self-awareness of our stress reactions without ruminating on them?
Think on the positive aspects. Do not focus on the negative. Think on positive. What are some things that you love to do? And do those things not as, not focusing on it as I must do this thing. It's important, but do it because you love those things. If you love running, do it. So focus on those positive aspects and less on the negative as much as you can. That's my suggestion.
Thank you, Glory. There was a question, and it's difficult and very stressful to think about the future. We just don't know what's going to happen. But any comments about how we might go about if the schools are reopened in the fall and how we can manage our stress around that?
Thank you, Cheryl. That has also been on my mind as well, that when school reopens in the fall, what happens? What happens to me as an individual? What happens to my kids as they go back to school? And so it's so uncertain right now. And I really do not have all the answers, but I think it's important to keep listening to what the university is asking us to do, what the provincial government is asking us to do, and also in taking control of the situation for ourselves. It's good to, if you have your face mask, please use it. If you have your gloves, use it. Just doing some little and simple things to keep your stress level as low as possible. Try not to focus so much on the negatives. Crisis is, there's a Chinese proverb that talks about viewing crisis as an opportunity, as an opportunity for change. So view this as an opportunity for change. What kinds of things can you change in your life? What kinds of things can you take control of? And if there are things you really cannot control, why stress about it? Focus on what you can control and how you can deal with the crisis. And if you need additional help, talk to a counselor. Go to the wellness center and talk to someone. So I hope those help.
Thanks, Glory. Another question that came up is that there are unhealthy strategies to deal with stress, but isn't trying to be healthy all of the time a lot of pressure and stressful too?
Yeah, if you view it from the, if you view it as a trying thing, that's why in self-care, it's important to do something that you actually love doing. And so it's no, you don't see it as a burden. You see it as something you love doing to help with your stress level. So look at it as a step into keeping you healthy and keeping you productive. So I love to run, so I focus on running. I see it as I enjoy doing it, so I do it. It may be anything for you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Melissa.
Cheryl, do you see any additional questions?
It's more of a comment, and it would be, Glory, you mentioned seeking out assistance with staff wellness. Is there one go-to place at the University of Calgary that people can contact?
Yeah, I do have a list here of resources. At the Taylor Institute, we have lots of resources online. I actually do have several go-tos. We have the University Wellness Services. So please get in touch with someone there if your stress level is overly high and you do need to talk to someone. We also have our UCalgary Mental Health and COVID-19 page and the campus mental health strategy as well. I've also listed other resources that one can go to. We also do have the Homewood for staff as well. There are many resources out there that we can link onto and use. Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you, Glory. And if anyone is following the chat, many people have posted information that they've found helpful, so thank you for that.
Thank you very much. One last question based on what's in the chat right now, but definitely if anyone else has any additional questions, feel free to post those. But there have been several people who have commented on the importance of staying connected with others during this time and strategies for managing that, particularly during the remote working and making sure that we stay in touch while recognizing Zoom fatigue.
Yeah, it's really important to stay in touch. It's important to stay connected. That's a key thing for me, is to stay connected. And so what I've tried to do is schedule weekly, once a week meeting to talk with my kids because they live in a different province. I live in a different province. And so just once a week, we do not always use Zoom. We use our Facebook app and we chat and we talk. I speak with my parents once a week as well, phone call chats. I do not use Zoom with my parents. And so for my other friends as well, we have recently I had a Zoom session with a few friends just to catch up and talk about things that are going on in our lives. So Zoom should not always be the go-to. It's important when we want to see every other person and want to see the faces, but use your phone as much as possible as well. And I also see people who, friends connecting, who stand 2-3 feet away from each other and they chat. That's another option for us now that we're allowed to go out a bit more. So you can connect with your friends at a safe distance physically and just chat. So there are other ways to do that, not just Zoom, but it is important to stay connected to someone else. Go for a run or a walk just to connect, make that eye-to-eye connection with someone else. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Glory. Your strategies have been super helpful, and there has been a sea of thank yous appearing in the chat. We really appreciate your sharing these tips with us.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I've just stopped sharing my screen so I can have a look at the chat as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending, and thank you for your time. It's been my pleasure to share a little bit about my research. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.